All right, ladies and gentlemen, welcome back to Torah Studies. So we begin a new book. Amidst much fanfare, we begin a new book. And like I mentioned last week, the interesting thing is that we're still in our book, right? Our Torah Studies book, but the Torah begins with a new book. Who would have thought that Torah and Torah Studies have different ways of dividing the books, but nonetheless, here we are. So it's lesson 12 of season 1 of 5785 of Torah Studies, but it is Parsha 1 of book 2 of the Torah, the book of Exodus. And of course, the book of Exodus, the main theme is, you guessed it,
Exodus.
the Exodus. Boom, can't make that up. Main theme is the Exodus. And of course, everything that goes on preceding the Exodus, after the Exodus, pre and post Exodus, that is the theme of this book. The entire book takes us from the time that the Jewish people are in Egypt, all the way through the time that they get out of Egypt and are now traversing in the wilderness, preparing to enter the Holy Land. So as the Torah portion, as the narrative begins, the Jewish people are firmly entrenched in the land of Egypt. Now, how do we get there? Well, we know this in the last 4 or 5 parshios, the last 4 or 5 weeks, we've been exploring how we got to Egypt, right? How do we get to Egypt? Well, Joseph ends up there. He becomes the viceroy. There's a famine. The famine moves down. Somebody asked me the question this past Shabbat. Maybe you came up in a class? I don't think so. Maybe. I don't know. I can't remember. Somebody asked me, after the famine was over, why didn't they just go home? You ever think of such a question? Such an obvious question. They came down because there was no food. The moment the famine lifts, go home. What's the problem? Why, just go home.
They were doing really well for a while until there was a new thing.
I think that might be it. They got a little seduced by a little, the Egyptian dream, as one might refer to it as the Golden Medina.
You took the words out of my mouth.
Yeah, or the Golden Sphinx. I don't know, whatever it is. Like they
wanted to walk like Egyptians.
Oh, right? Wasn't that like who used to do that? Which comedian? Did the end of his bit?
Steve Martin.
Steve Martin. Who, interestingly, Steve Martin I met in St. Bart's once. I was there to make a minyan for a guy named Ron Perlman, who's the CEO, I don't know, maybe still is the CEO of Revlon, used to be married to Ellen Barkin, but now I'm barking up the wrong tree. But anyway, the point is that he has this thing, he has a minyan in St. Bart's on his
he would fly people in.
He would fly 9 yeshiva students from Brooklyn with food we stayed at the Carl Gustav in these villas in St. Bart's. He had a security detail. We had a minyan there. The Rebbe told him, like a few things. He was very close to the Rebbe told him to make a commitment wherever he always downs with the minyan Shabbos morning. So he does. He flies out guys when he's on
his yacht?
I was on his yacht. Yeah, the Ultimate 3. Anyway, so anyway, what's the point? The point is, so we once landed in St. Bart's. It's a tiny airport, and Steve Martin's right there. So like Steve, he sees 9 yeshiva students, runs the other way. You've never seen a man running like an Egyptian away from the Jewish people. Anyway, I'm sure he's a great guy, and I'm sure the last thing he expected to see on his St. Bart's vacation were a bunch of Chabad yeshiva students wearing white shirts, black hats, and all right, back to the story. So as we open, the Jewish people are firmly entrenched in Egypt, and slavery begins. The Torah tells us about the decrees of slavery, i.e., the persecution that created the condition of slavery. And of course, this week we're introduced to the birth of Moses, who will be the eventual individual who leads the Jewish people out of the land of Egypt and into freedom at God's behest. But before we get to the Exodus, before we get to the flip of the narrative, the Torah gets into fairly grave detail or graphic detail about the decrees against the Jewish people. So we're going to read some verses that speak about the condition of slavery, Pharaoh's decrees against the Jewish people, and about 2 brave Jewish heroes that stood up to Pharaoh's decree. So we are going to open up our books or booklets to page number 182. I will open this up over here as well. Give me 1 second. Here we go. All right. And we are primed to begin. All right. Here we go. Defiance and reward. Heroic defiance. Jake, please read text number 1. Yeah.
The king of Egypt spoke to the Hebrew midwives, one of whom was named Shiphrah and the other Puah. And he said, when you deliver the Hebrew women, look at the birth stool. If it is a boy, kill him. If it is a girl, let her live. The midwives, fearing God, did not do as the king of Egypt had told them. They let the boys live. So the king of Egypt summoned the midwives and said to them, why have you done this thing, letting the boys live? The midwives said to Pharaoh, because the Hebrew women are not like the Egyptian women. They are vigorous. Before the midwife can come to them, they have given birth.
All right. Thank you. So that was the excuse, that the midwife said, we would love to participate in your campaign of infanticide. However, by the time we get there, they've already given birth, and that is that. But just I want to focus quickly on the decree. The decree is, if it is a boy, kill him. If it is a girl, let her live. In the Hebrew, the English is always, it is what it is. In the Hebrew, it's im bain hu v'hamiten oto. If it's a boy, then murder or kill the boy. V'imbasi v'chaya. And if it's a daughter, if it's a girl, then let her live. However, v'chaya doesn't only mean let her live. It means make her live. And so the commentaries, especially the Rebbe and Hasidic philosophy, explain that there were actually 2 decrees. One decree was a physical extermination of the boys, and for the girls, spiritual assimilation. V'chaya means that they should be raised in under the spell of Egyptian culture, Egyptian philosophy, Egyptian way of life. So the boys eradicate physically, the girls snuff them out spiritually and on an identity level, erase their identity. So and the question is always, which one is worse? I mean, I think we would all say probably the physical is worse, but I don't know. I mean, it's you could argue that the Velvet Holocaust might be even more severe, may have taken more over the years than the literal one. The Velvet Holocaust, of course, I refer to as the idea of assimilation. Now, but that's just an aside explaining some of the verses. But what we see clearly here is that Pharaoh had an intention that the Jewish boys, none of them should survive. Shiphrah and Puah, which we know are not their real names. Shiphrah was the pseudonym for Yocheved, and Puah was the pseudonym for Miriam. Who were Yocheved and Miriam? Yocheved was the mother of Moses. Miriam was the older sister of Moses. So again, Yocheved was married to a fellow named Amram. They had 3 sons, Miriam, a daughter, Aaron, a son, and Moses, the baby, right? Also a son. And so that's Yocheved and Miriam. They were a mother-daughter combination of midwives helping deliver the Jewish babies. Now, the question could come up, and I want to address some obvious questions that come up in the narrative that are not necessarily part of tonight's story arc, but nonetheless, I think are important to ask. The question is, were there only 2 midwives in the entire Egypt for the Jewish people? Only 2 midwives? It's a lot. That's a lot of work, right? Right. We have Dr. Max, you're a pediatrician. I mean, 2 midwives for the entire Jewish populace of Egypt, that would be quite ambitious. The commentators explain, I think it is, I want to say it's the Ibn Ezra, but I could be wrong. Classic commentaries, one of the classic commentaries explain, there weren't just 2 midwives, but these were the 2 head midwives. In other words, these were the 2 midwives that were kind of directing the other midwives. And so if it were a practice, the practice would be in their names, but they had other midwives working under them. So that's a little bit of a point of clarification. Now, moving along. So what happens? They stand up to Pharaoh. Now, lest you think, no big deal. It's a big deal. It's a big deal to stand up to the emperor, to the king of your country, who's talking about infanticide, who has at this point right, the thumb of slavery on top of the heads of the Jewish people and to say, sorry, bro, we came too late, can't do it. They were literally putting their lives at risk. And this was an extremely courageous and heroic act of defiance on the part of these two women. So just to clarify that, the question is, was there a reward? Now, that might not be a question that you and I would ask, but it's a question that the Torah deems fitting to address in the very next verses. Take a look at the next two verses. This is going to be text number 2. You know what? Let's do this. Jake, read text 2 as well, just because it's the continuation of what you just read, and it's a davar shalom, it's a complete thing.
And God dealt well with the midwives, and the people multiplied and increased greatly. And because the midwives feared God, he made them houses.
Okay, so here we go. So we have 2 verses that talk about the outcome, or the result of the heroism of the midwives. God dealt with them well. The people multiplied and increased greatly, as opposed to the numbers being reduced. So God treats them well. The people are multiplying. That's two rewards almost, or 2 positive benefits. The third one is, because the midwives feared God, he made them houses. Now, let's pause here for a moment. This verse 21, he made them houses. That, because they feared God, he made them houses. That is going to be the entire class. What is the definition of houses? Houses. Now, I know what you're thinking. Houses? I know what houses are, right? Houses are houses. Like, how complicated are houses? Okay, all right. Hold that thought. What I want to share tonight are 3 different perspectives, 3 different angles on the meaning of the reward of the midwives, right? They did this incredible act, and God made for them houses. What does that mean? 3 interpretations. What I'm going to do is, of course, needless to say, one of these 3 interpretations will be Rashi's interpretation. And that's the primary one that we're going to focus on, analyze, rip apart, put back together, and walk away with a takeaway lesson. But I do want to share first a broader spectrum or scope of commentary on this reward of what it means that God made for them houses, and then see how Rashi differentiates perhaps, and then that's how we're going to get into the questions. So in order to do this, we're going to go out of order in this class. Okay? The text in the textbook and text in the pamphlets that you have, and I'll pull up the PDF soon, are written in a certain order. We're going to go out of order. Okay? We're going to go out of order. And we're going to start, I believe, without looking, I think it's text 6. Okay, let's pull it up here. 1 second. I'll pull it up here on the screen, and then I'll be able to follow along as well. Not 5. 6a. Here we go. 6a. All right, Ibn Ezra, classic commentary, lived, 900 years ago. And here's what he says. All right, Tova, please read text 6a.
The Gaon explained, he made them houses where they hid from Pharaoh and were not found.
Okay, so this is a fairly simple and intuitive explanation. When it says that God made them houses, he literally made them houses. And they hid from Pharaoh. Why did they have to hide from Pharaoh? What do you think?
It's pretty easy. He would punish them severely.
They were in trouble. They were in big trouble.
But they had such a good excuse.
They had a good excuse. And you know what? After the 30th time, Pharaoh probably was on to them. He's like, wait a minute. You're in big trouble, mister. I forget which sitcom that was from, right? You're in big, maybe Full House. You're in big trouble. I mean, look, you fool me once, etc. Fool me twice. All right. Fool me 100 times. There's a problem. So God made them houses where they could actually hide. That's an interesting interpretation. Take a look at the Radak. The Radak gives a similar interpretation, and that is text 6b. Please continue, Toba, to read that one as well.
The interpretation of the verse, God made them houses, is that God hid them from Pharaoh so that he should not do them any harm.
There you go. Houses, shelter, protection, hiding. It all works around the same theme. The Radak, the Ibn Ezra, they're all saying the same thing. By the way, the Ibn Ezra says the Gaon explained. Who's the Gaon? Like he expects us to know who that is. The Gaon refers to Rabbi Sadia Gaon, one of the Gaonim. How do you translate Gaonim? There was like a period of in Jewish scholarship, you have the Talmudic era, the Mishnaic era, and the Talmudic era. You have Tanaim and Amoraim. They wrote the Mishnah and the Talmud. By the way, decoding the Talmud coming up in a few weeks. New JLI course. We're sending out information soon. All right, back to our story. So we have Tanaim, who wrote the Mishnah, Amoraim, who wrote the Talmud. Then you have the Gaonim, the Gaonic period. I don't know how to translate Gaonim. I don't know, whatever, the Gaonim. And Rabbi Saadia Gaon lived around the year 900, in the 900s, and that's what he says. So already from the 900s, we have commentaries that are explaining that what does it mean that God made for them batim? Bayit, batim, houses, literal houses to protect them. So that's one angle. So if you choose, I'm going to give you 3 doors that you can open. Three options here. If you choose, when the verse says that God rewarded them by making them houses, you can choose to understand this literally, or literal translation of houses, batim, which are houses, shelter, protection. Okay. We're going to now look at another angle. Okay, here's another angle. One second. The next angle is going to be found in the Midrash. Okay, we're going to have to go back. Turn back, please. The Midrash is going to be found, text number 5. Okay, Midrash, Shemot Rabbah. And here we have a Midrashic take on the reward. I'll read this one, text number 5. God dealt well with the midwives, right? He made them houses, etc. Rabbi Barachia said, in the name of Rabbi Chia ben Rabbi Abba, that is what is written. He said to man, behold, fear of God, that is wisdom. What is the reward for fear? It is Torah. Let me explain before we go further. It's a little bit of I'm not crazy about the translation. It says, Vayomer la'adam hein yiras Hashem yichachma. The fear of God leads to wisdom, or is the foundation of wisdom, which means that someone who's God-fearing becomes wise. So he says, what's the reward for fearing God? Torah, i.e. wisdom, right? Fear and wisdom are correlated. So what's the reward for fear? Torah. Now, who have fear of heaven here? The midwives, right? We're not reading a jumble of words. We're reading something that makes sense. Who had yiras shamayim, fear of heaven? The midwives. The midwives would not compromise on life, on the value of life, right? On the sanctity of life, just because Pharaoh said, kill the boys. They did not. That's called fear of God. And what does it lead to? Wisdom. And what is wisdom in a Jewish sense? Torah. Here we go. So because Yocheved feared God, right? Fear, it leads to wisdom. She begot Moses, of whom it is written he was good. And the Torah, which is also called the good acquisition, was given through him and is called after his name, as it is stated, remember the Torah of Moses, my servant. Here we go. Fear of heaven leads to wisdom. What's the wisdom? Moses. So just to pause here for a quick second. According to the Midrash, what's the reward of the midwives? Well, there's 2 midwives, right? What's Yocheved's reward? Moses, a wise son, not a wise guy. That's something else. A wise son, a son who will be the one who communicates with God, the one who conveys the messages of Torah to us, right? Torah Moshe. It's the Torah of Moses. Great. What about Miriam, right? 2 midwives. What about Miriam? As for Miriam, Betzalel, who was filled with wisdom, as it is written, I filled him with the Spirit of God with wisdom, emerged from her. And he crafted an ark. Guess what? For the Torah, which is called good. That is, God was good to the midwives. So here we have the Midrash, and I want to paraphrase it because, again, Midrash is written not so simply, sometimes cryptically, but just if we break it down, very simple. We had 2 midwives, Yocheved and Miriam. Yocheved is the mother, Miriam's the daughter. So Yocheved, I should probably mention, at that point, Moses had not yet been born. Even though she was a midwife, she only had 2 kids at that point. So her reward for sparing the Jewish boys and protecting the Jewish boys, fearing God, is having a son who is imbued with wisdom, a son like Moses. So that's her reward. What about Miriam, the daughter? Well, eventually, one of her descendants will be this man named, not eventually, like 1 or 2 generations, probably her Betzalel ben Uri ben Hur. Yeah, like a grandson. Anyway, Betzalel is a fellow named Betzalel. And who's Betzalel? Betzalel is the man who was filled with wisdom who built the Mishkan. He was like the contractor who built the Mishkan, the tabernacle, the first home for God, and built the ark for the Torah, which is the wisdom. So it all comes full circle. All right. Makes sense? Yeah, that was a reward. So we have okay. We have one interpretation. God made them houses. What does that mean? God made them literal houses, shelter, protection from Pharaoh. We have a midrashic interpretation. What's the reward? The reward is Moses and Bezalel. Their fear led to wisdom. They had either children or grandchildren. They had progeny who were just very wise and very special people. That was a reward. Great. That's the second option. Let's look at Rashi. I saved the Rashi for last. I didn't say best. We're not judging, right? It's all Torah, but we're saving the Rashi for last because that is going to be the main focus. And I want to ask the question. I'm telling you right now what my question is. Why didn't Rashi like the other two options of classic commentaries? Why did he prefer what he ultimately goes with? So here we go. Let's do Rashi now. Jake, I'll ask you to please read and go all the way back to text number 3. Take it away, please.
He made them houses, dynasties of the priesthood and of the Levites and of royalty, which are all termed batim. Houses, as the verse states, and Solomon built the house of God and the house of the king. The house of God, i.e., a dynasty of priests and Levites from Yocheved, Shifra, and the house of the king, i.e., a royal dynasty from Miriam, Hua, just as it is stated in the Talmud in Tractate Sotah.
Here we go. This is Rashi's comment on the verse Exodus 1, chapter 1, verse 21. This is the full quote. What Jake just read, right? This is the Hebrew right here. This is the English right there at the bottom. That is Rashi's commentary in a nutshell. What are these houses that God built for the midwives? A dynasty, 2 dynasties, right? Wasn't there a soap opera or a show called Dynasty?
Absolutely.
No relation. No relation. That's something else. A dynasty, 2 dynasties. A dynasty of Kohanim and Leviim. That's one dynasty of priests and Levites. And another dynasty of kings. Kings. Well, hold on. Who came from who? Yocheved. From her emerged a dynasty of priests and Levites, because she had a son who was Aaron, who was the father of the Kohanim. She had another son, Moses, who's the father of the Levim, the Levites. So from her comes a dynasty of Kohanim and Levim. Right? That's Yocheved's reward. What about Miriam? Her reward is, it's a little, the family tree is a little bit complicated, but somewhere in amongst her descendants is one of the progenitors, is that the right word, of King David of the Davidic dynasty, and thus she is intertwined with the dynasty of kings. So if you ask Rashi, what was the reward? They sacrificed their life to spare the lives of these Jewish boys. How did God reward them? With houses. What are houses? Not literal houses. Dynasties. Dynasty, right? It's like the house of, even in monarchies, wasn't it called the house of something?
Yes.
Am I wrong?
Yes, you're right.
Like the house of, I don't know, whatever. So a house could also be a reference to a dynasty. Rashi says that's exactly what the verse is telling us. Not that God made a literal house, right? No, God made a figurative house for them. God gave Yocheved the dynasty of priests and Levites. God gave Miriam the dynasty of royalty. Great. And then Rashi adds a very curious detail. If you noticed at the end of that Rashi, after Rashi explains that, Rashi says, just as it is stated in the Talmud Tractate Sotah, he points us to the source of this interpretation. We had the Ibn Ezra and the Radak, and we had the Sajagon, who told us that houses are literal. We had the Midrash that told us that the reward was Moses and Bezalel. And now we have Rashi, who tells us about dynasties. And he says his source is the Talmud, Tractate Sotah. Have I mentioned the Talmud class starting soon? Okay, so what does the Talmud actually say? Let's take a look at text number 4, and let's see the source where Rashi gets this from. Toba, please read this one, text number 4, page 184.
And it came to pass, because the midwives feared God, he made them houses. Rav and Shmuel disagree as to the precise interpretation of these houses. One says that God made the houses of the priesthood and the Levites descend from the midwives, and one says that God made the houses of royalty descend from them. The one who says that it is referring to the houses of the priesthood and the Levites is referring to Aaron and Moses, who were sons of Yohevite. And the one who says that it is referring to houses of royalty is referring to David, who also comes from Miriam.
There you go. And so what does Rashi do? What does Rashi do? Rashi says, we'll combine them. The Mishnah says, the Gemara, the Talmud says that there's a machloket, a disagreement between Rav and Shmuel. They disagree, right? One says it refers to the house, the dynasty of priesthood and Levites. And the other one says it's the dynasty of royalty. And Rashi says, why can't we have both? It's both. It's both. From Yocheved, her reward was, in other words, by the way, in general, when you have two opinions in the Talmud, the ideal way to understand it is one says one thing, the other says another thing, and they're not disagreeing. Both are correct. If you can interpret it in a way that you can reconcile that both are correct, that's the ideal. We rarely no one's looking to say, oh, pass the popcorn, they're actually fighting. If we can find out, if we can interpret them to actually be like different things, then it's great. So when the Talmud, and I'm going to pull up the Talmud again, you guys have it in front of you. The Talmud doesn't say that they actually disagree. In the Hebrew, it says Rav u'Shmuel, right? There's two guys, Rav and Shmuel. Charamar, one says, Bate Kuna Levia. Charamar Bate Malchus. One says the house, the dynasty of priests and Levites, and the other one says the dynasty of kings. Who says they're disagreeing, right? One's talking about Aaron and Moshe Yocheved, and the other one's talking about David from Miriam. In other words, there's two midwives, and each one gets a dynasty. You get a dynasty. You get a dynasty. It's kind of like Oprah with cars, but now it's with dynasties, and it's only two people in the crowd. Yocheved gets a dynasty. Miriam gets a dynasty, right? Yocheved gets a dynasty of priests and Levites. Miriam gets a dynasty of kings. Right? That's Rashi's opinion. That's the Talmud, and that's what Rashi references when he says, "Take a look at Tractate Sutta." That was the quote. I have a few questions. You probably have some of your own, but I'll share with you my questions. Question number one: if I ask you, which is the simplest interpretation? I'm gonna quickly recap. We have three options. Option number one: houses mean houses. Option two: houses somehow is a reference to Moses and Bezalel, who were wise. Okay, whatever. Third interpretation is houses refer to dynasties, a dynasty that comes from Yocheved, priests and Levites, and a dynasty that comes from Miriam, dynasty of kings. Which is the most simple interpretation?
The Ibn Ezra, that it's real houses.
Houses are houses. A house is a house, right? It's the three H's of real estate: house, 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 right? You can't go wrong with house. So what's going on here? The Ibn Ezra, the Radak, Saadia Gaon. Well, I mean, Saadia Gaon lived a few hundred years before Rashi. Rashi presumably was very well versed, and he certainly knew this angle, and yet he chose to go in a different direction. Now, obviously, we just read the source of Rashi's interpretation. Rashi's getting it from the Talmud. But why does Rashi let go of the simple, what we would think is a simple interpretation, and run after something that's a little bit less intuitive? Question number one. If in other words, if Rashi is Pshuto Shamikra, the simple meaning of the text, why does he abandon the simple meaning? Right? Imagine the simple meaning running after Rashi saying, why have you left me? Where are you going? Right? That's probably not happening. But right, imagine that's sort of thing. Then you have the next question. The next question is, if Rashi is abandoning Pshat, or what we think is the simple interpretation, why does he choose the Talmudic interpretation over the Midrashic? Right? The Talmud says that it's two dynasties. The Midrash says that it's two individuals. Why choose a dynasty over an individual? Okay. Question number two. Question number three. Question number three is, why does Rashi cite his source. He says, like it says in Tractate Sota.
Right.
Guess what, folks? He never does that. You could study Rashi. I mean, there's so many, hundreds of Rashi on every given Torah portion. He never quotes his sources. He doesn't tell you where he's getting it from. You get in and out with Rashi very quickly. He gives you the interpretation, and you're meant to figure out or not figure out or ponder or not ponder where he's actually getting his sources from. Rashi suddenly drops over here a message, K'di Isa b'Masechet Sota, as it says in Tractate Sota, in the Talmud. Why tell us? Now, it makes it easier to find where he gets it from, but he never does this. Well, I can't say never. He rarely does this. And here's one of the rules of Rashi that we haven't yet encountered. I mean, we've gone through, when we started the series, I guess 11 weeks ago. So I told you that the way the Rebbe understands Rashi, you have all these rules that kind of like emerge, hundreds of rules that emerge when studying Rashi. Well, one of the rules of Rashi is that Rashi will never cite his source. In other words, he'll never say, here's where I got it from, unless it's critical to the understanding of the interpretation. So the question is, why is the source in this context critical to understanding the interpretation? It seems to be fairly easy. A house is a dynasty, and there were two dynasties from these two women. There were two dynasties. I got it. It's great. Do I need to know where you got it from? Not really. It sounds good. I mean, we have other questions, but why cite the source in Rashi? Why does Rashi himself cite the source? 3 questions. I'll recap them. Number 1, why does Rashi abandon what appears to be a very simple interpretation? Number 2, if Rashi is abandoning the simple interpretation, why does he choose the Talmudic one over the Midrashic one? And number 3, why does Rashi cite his source in the Talmud when we could otherwise figure out where he got it from? Make sense? Yes? Yes. Questions, comments thus far?
Yes.
Okay. Good. All right. The answer, my friends, is blowing in the wind. It's literally freezing outside. But, I got to say this. The answer is going to be incredible. It's going to be thrilling, exhilarating. It will take your breath away. And so let's begin. I think it's kind of cool that as we start a new book, we're going to get like some deeper insights into Rashi. We've said until now, again, over the last 11 weeks, 12, today's the 12th session. Over the last 12 weeks, we've said that Rashi is pshat, simple interpretation. Well, my friends, here's the dealio. Simple is not synonymous with literal. I'll say that one more time. Simple is not the same as literal. Just because Rashi has pledged to give us the simple interpretation does not mean he's giving us the literal meaning of the word. Yes, the literal meaning of the word batim is houses. That's the literal meaning of the word. A bayit is a house. Batim are houses, plural. So when the Torah says that God made batim, houses, for the 2 midwives, the literal meaning is a house is a house. But literal is not always the same as the simple interpretation, because the simple interpretation is the one that makes sense in the context of the verse, and the literal meaning does not make sense in the context of the verse, and I'll tell you why. In order to understand what the wrinkle here is, you got to look back at the original verse. So let's look back, all the way back, to text number 2, text number 2. Okay, verse 21. And because the midwives fear God, he made them houses, but that's not, English is not going to help us here. In the Hebrew, vayas lahem batim, he made them houses. I want you to tell me what's wrong with that word. When you talk about a house, what verb do you use? He built. He built the city. No, right? He built. It shouldn't be vayas lahem batim. It should be va yiven lahem batim. He built for them houses, not he made houses. You don't make a house, you build a house. You have the wrong verb for the wrong noun, right? It's the wrong word. It's not vayas in the Hebrew. It's not he made them houses, he built houses for them. This is one of the clues that tells Rashi there's something else at play here. It's not a literal house, it's a figurative house. Made houses is not literal. It's not, if it was a literal house, it would have said he built. By the fact that it says he made, it means a more conceptual house. But now we have two more options, right? We have the Midrashic option, we have the Talmudic option. We still haven't answered that question two, but we've answered question one. Why doesn't Rashi go with the literal meaning of the word batim, which are houses? The reason is because look at the whole verse. 2 words before that, it doesn't say built, it says made. And made is the wrong word for a house, a literal house. Made is a good word for a figurative house. All right, that's one point. Next point. If you look at tractate Sota, right, where text 4 comes from, and the reward of the midwives is discussed, there's also a very interesting discussion a few pages earlier. Who read last? Jake, you read last? Toba, are we up to you? I think we're up to you.
So.
All right, Toba, please read text number 7, a very quick text, very quick line from tractate Sota as well, same tractate that we quoted before.
A person is rewarded according to the magnitude of their action.
So thank you. So this is what we call colloquially, it's not the exact quote from the Talmud, but it's kind of a paraphrase, Mida keneged Mida. You may have heard that. Mida keneged Mida means measure for measure. According to what you do is what is the reward that you get. Now, I'm going to read as the Talmud continues, or the Mishnah continues, giving an example of Mida keneged Mida, which is the reward is commensurate to the effort. Here we go. A person, text number 8, I'm going to read this one. A person is rewarded measure for measure for their good deeds. Miriam, now here's an example. This is a new part of the story that is also told in this week's Torah portion, so it should be familiar. But here's that we haven't discussed this yet. But here it comes into the Talmud. Miriam waited for Moses for 1 hour at the shore of the Nile, as it is stated, and his sister stood far off to know what would be done to him. Let me just clarify. When his mother, Yocheved, the loving midwife, when she could no longer hide her own son, Moshe, so she put him in a basket and cast him to the Nile River. I think we all know the story, right? And then it says, presumably she couldn't bear to be there and watch her son float away in the river. But his sister, Miriam, the aforementioned Pua, the second midwife, Miriam stood there to see what was going to happen. Therefore, the Jewish people delayed their travels in the desert for 7 days to wait for her when she had leprosy. As it is stated, and Miriam was confined outside the camp for 7 days, and the people journeyed not until Miriam was brought in again. Because she waited for Moses, the people waited for her. Mida keneged Mida. This is an insight into the way that divine reward, and you can learn one from the other, divine punishment as well, but that's not the next class, the way divine reward works. It's not like it's a random reward. It's like, oh, you waited for your brother, you were so compassionate and kind, you get a lollipop. What's the connection? No, you wait, you'll be waited for. In other words, it works. It's the reward is commensurate, the Mida keneged Mida, measure for measure. The investment, look, if you plant cucumber seeds, I guess, I'm not a farmer. Yeah, probably seeds. What else are you planting? Then what's going to grow? Cucumbers. If tomatoes grow, I don't even know what to say. I'll be honest. I'm not sure what to say. Something went wrong, right? If you plant the chesed, the kindness of waiting for others, then what grows is the energy of waiting for you, right? If you are patient, patience will come back to you. That's the way it works. Mida keneged Mida. That is the way that God runs his world, is that our actions, our investment literally yields a profit in the same measure. Mida keneged Mida. You ready? This is where the bomb is dropped in a positive way, positive bomb. Back to our story. What did these midwives do? What did they do? They saved the Jewish boys, right? They saved their lives. Let me ask you a question. It's a bit rhetorical, but let me ask it anyway. Did they only save those boys' lives individually?
Save the Jewish people.
They saved the Jewish people. They didn't just save the lives of the literal boys that they saved. They saved the future of the Jewish people. They saved generations and generations of Yidden, right? The Jewish people were built on these boys that were rescued from, at childbirth. This is what's going on. They didn't just rescue one person, they rescued the future of the Jewish people. So Rashi says, so what's the reward? Is the reward one offspring? Is the reward Moses? Or is the reward Bezalel? No. The reward has to be bigger in scope. You with me? You got it, right? I literally see the light bulb go off. The reward, they didn't do an individual act of saving one life. They saved a life that then enabled the continuation, the continuity of the Jewish people. Their reward, Midah, Keneged Midah, measure for measure, is a dynasty. Not just one. Oh, we'll give you a Moses. Moses is a pretty good reward, by the way. I'm not looking to gift Moses in the mouth. Yeah, that's the expression. No, sorry, that's a horse, right? We're not looking to gift, right? We're not looking, but Moses is one person. Bezalel, oh, a genius. You have to build the Mishkan. He figured it out. It was filled with Chacham Lev, it says. He was wise of heart, wisdom, amazing from his his bubbies, Miriam's, from her Yira Shamayim, from her fear of heaven. So here she had somebody in her family that was so wise and so smart, and he built the ark, and it was amazing. Great. They didn't just save one life, they saved the future. The reward has to also be on a future, on a large scale. A dynasty. Comes along Rashi, and he says, where's the source for this? The Talmud Tractate Sota. And everyone thinks it's the Rav and Shmuel. Nope. That's not what he's referring to. He's referring to the Midah Keneged Midah piece from the same tractate. The fact that Rav and Shmuel said, oh, dynasty, Rashi doesn't have to tell you the source of that. He says, look in Tractate Sota, look a little bit further, and you'll see why I had to choose this interpretation over the Midrashic. Again, we have three options. Picture yourself standing before three doors. Behind door number one is a literal interpretation of Batim houses. But the literal doesn't work because it doesn't say he built them house. He made houses. You don't make a house, you build a house, right? You make a cheesecake. Even that you probably bake, whatever. You build a house. So that one's out. So door number one, we're shutting the door. We're putting the yellow tape on it, caution. That's over. Fine. With all due respect to the Ibn Ezra and the Radak and the Sajagon, with all due respect, we're not going with that. We're not buying them. Great. The Medrash. Medrash says, what was the reward? Moses and Bezalel. Great. Oh, I like it. I like it. They had great reward. However, it's not big enough. It's not big enough. They didn't just save people. They saved the future. You got to get a big reward. Big reward, Rashi says, look in the Talmud. Not just the fact that it has an opinion that says that there were dynasties that came from each of these two midwives, two women, but no, the Talmud, that same tractate, a few pages earlier says, and to quote in the Hebrew, it says, the midah shada moded ba modedin lo. A person is rewarded according to magnitude, not magnitude, according to the measure that a person measures, that is what they are measured. So if you go big, God is going to go big. Eric or Julie, jump in with a question.
Yeah, so I have a question. Why couldn't we say that Moses and Bezalel be the future and the dynasties that they simply represent, just in the same
You
way
could.
the houses could, and then it's just really a nuance if you're looking at
You
it,
could.
perhaps if you're looking at it that way.
You could. Excellent question. You could. But if you look back at the Midrash, and the Midrash would have been, where are we here? Text number 5, yeah? It says, the Midrash literally says that the reward that Yocheved got her reward, she begot Moses. And Miriam's reward is Bezalel. In other words, the Midrash doesn't say that. You're right. You could have conceptually, if it would have said that, it would have worked. But it didn't. It says that this woman got this reward, and this woman got that reward, or that person was their reward. And Rashi says, that's it. Again, no offense to Moses and Moshe and Bezalel, but that's it. They got one person. That's got to be bigger than that. Rashi says, let's look at the Talmud. The Talmud talks about reward being measured according to what a person does. A big effort, an effort that spans generations needs to also have a result that spans generations. And look, the Torah that Moses gave us, that communicated with us, spans generations. The Mishkan that Bezalel built for us lasted for hundreds of years. So on that level, that is something that is true. But the phraseology of the Midrash is, because Yocheved feared God, she begot Moses. As for Miriam, Bezalel emerged from her. That's the language of the Midrash. Rashi says, I don't know.
Yeah, but why would he need a source though if he felt so strongly about it?
I guess good question. I guess in general, Rashi pulls from these sources. Typically we don't know their source. Typically we don't.
But you say he states the source here, whereas he usually doesn't state the source.
Right. So here he states the source not from the Midrash, from the Talmud, to remind us that the reason is because the Talmud tells us about the measure for measure, and the idea that that indeed we're looking at a longer picture. Could Rashi have combined the ideas and said that the reward is Moses, and Moses is, something that spans generations, but Bezalel as well? He could have. He didn't. I'll tell you one more thing about this. Maybe your question is going to touch on the final piece of tonight's class, and so hold your question for a second, and let's explore one more element. This is the final piece. If you look at the Midrash and the Talmud carefully, you'll notice that they're each focusing on something else. The Midrash focuses on the courage, the fear of heaven that the midwives had. They were so God-fearing that they stood up with courage. It's very emotional. The Midrash is very, it tugs at our heartstrings, and it shares like the emotional space that the midwives were in, and their defiance of the law and order and of the ruler of the land, etc., and how because of their fear of God, that led to wisdom. And the Talmud is different than Midrash. Midrash speaks to emotion. And let me pull up a text that actually talks to this. Take a look. I'll read this quickly. Take a look at text. Hold on. Take a look at text 11. Tzemach Tzedek told Reb Hendel in a private audience, Zohar, which is Kabbalah, uplifts the soul. Midrash inspires the heart. Psalms of tears cleanses the vessel. So Midrash is all about emotion. It inspires the heart. What about the Talmud? It's not listed here, but the Talmud is different. The Talmud doesn't inspire the heart per se, but it rather instructs us about how to act. In other words, the Talmud teaches us the law, Jewish law. Midrash is emotional. The Talmud is legal and practical. Two different areas of Jewish study, both important and both necessary. So here's the deal. The Midrash focuses on the courage of the midwives. Because of their courage and bravery and God-fearing nature, so one was rewarded with Moses, the other with Bezalel. That was a reward, their wisdom, for the courage, etc. The Talmud says something else. It's not about their courage. It's about what they did. They saved generations of Jews. It's a practical, right? It's not the emotion of it. It's not about their bravery. It's about what they actually did. They saved generation. They saved the future of Judaism. And because of that, they were rewarded with dynasties. And I think the message here is that Rashi, it might even be in the text. Let me see if it's in the text. Rashi, here we go. And Eric, I think this might address the question that you asked, because I think it's a good question. Rashi's commentary, this is text number 12. Rashi's commentary explaining the plain meaning of the text is connected to the world of action. Its concern is reflected in the statement, exegesis is not the main point, but rather action is the bottom line. As such, the relevant reward here is the houses of Kohanim, Levim, and royalty, which are also connected to actual homes, the house of God and the house of the king, because the most crucial element was their actions, namely sparing and preserving the eternal Jewish home. It's not so much about their bravery. It's not so much about their courage, not so much about their God-fearing. Yes, that is what compelled them, or what drove them internally to act as they did. But the main concern, and Rashi, who focuses on Pshat, on the simple meaning, is also focused on action in that sense. Like, bottom line, Rashi is saying it's about the action. What did they do? They saved the future of Judaism. They were given a dynasty that would speak to the future of the Jewish people. And this is how I want to wrap this up and say and share the following. To wrap this up, do you have access to the kitchen? No. Okay. All right, we're going to pull out the chicken poppers soon. All right, here's the deal. We got chicken poppers in the oven. All right, so here's the deal. This is actually true. Dessert. Yeah. I mean, some people do cake, but poppers are better. All right, so here's the deal. The house of the priests and the Levites and the house of the kings. What are they? What are they metaphorically? What do they mean? The priests and the Levites, Shevet Levi, they were the teachers of the Jewish people, right? They were the educators. They were the spiritual guides. And what about the kings, the royalty? They told you what to do. Kings tell you what to do. Okay, here's the deal. What does it mean on a deeper level that from Yocheved and Miriam came the dynasty of the priests and Levites, the dynasty of the kings? It means that what is their legacy? Their legacy, and this is what Rashi is teaching us, their legacy are individuals who are dedicated to not just their own study, but to seeing it through, but to making sure that others would know. Not just descendants who would be studious, but descendants who would be dedicated to ensuring that others are educated. Descendants who not only are doing the right thing, but are dedicated to making sure that others do the right thing. Again, the focus is not on self, but on action. What am I doing for another? This is the legacy. Yocheved and Miriam didn't save themselves. That wasn't what they were doing. They were saving others. And so they gave birth to dynasties that literally are about being there for others. The priests and Levites are of service to the Jewish people. The kings are leading the Jewish people. It's not about self. A king is not allowed to have a lot of wealth, or at least excessive wealth, horses, wives, etc. The king is there for the people. A king is meant to lift and to guide the people. The priests and Levites are meant to lift and guide the people spiritually. And that becomes their eternal legacy. And that becomes the message for us. You know, it's easy to say that my Jewish experience is going to be, learning and doing and feeling. That's the midrashic angle, feeling. I want to feel, they used to say, somebody says, I feel very Jewish in my heart. We call that cardiac Judaism, right? Which is not bad, which is, by the way, a very good thing. But Judaism is more than feeling. It's even more than action. It's being there for others. This is Miriam's legacy. This is Yocheved's legacy. And this is our calling, to be on the team of these dynasties. You may not be a Levite or a Kohen. I'm not, right? But as my Maimonides says, one of the texts we're skipping now just to wrap up, anyone can be a Kohen and Levi. Well, not literally, but figuratively. Any one of us can dedicate their lives to being there for someone else, to educate, to help, to guide someone else. We can all be there as a royal, as a literal leader, to help, instruct someone how to do a mitzvah. Look, the previous Rebbe once said that we're all here for each other. And if you say, well, I don't have what to teach, one second. If you know Aleph, teach Aleph. You know Bet, teach Bet. Whatever you know, teach. Whatever you have, share with someone else. Never hold it just for yourself. If you're inspired from a Torah class, I wonder if there's a Torah class. If you're inspired from a Torah class, share the message. Share the message with someone else. Don't hold it for yourself. Be like Yocheved. Be like Miriam. Be someone who shares the inspiration, shares the message, be part of the dynasty, be part of the magic, and share it. This is Rashi's angle. The Medrash says, they were so courageous. That's more of the individual. And so they begot Moses, an individual, and Betzalel, individual. That's the Midrashic take, which is more personal. Whereas the Talmudic take is bottom line. They saved a gaggle of Jews. Gaggle, can we say that? Well, they saved generations of Jews, right? And thus they got a dynasty that would be there for generations of Jews. Let's join the dynasty. I have sign-up sheets right here. I'm kidding. No, each of us just share, inspire, be there for someone else. Someone needs inspiration. If someone needs attentiveness, if someone needs our love, let's be there. If someone needs guidance, suggestions, practical help, let's be there. If someone needs to be shown how to wrap tefillin, help them wrap tefillin. And if you need help wrapping tefillin, check out YouTube. There's so many cool videos about how to do it, right? Who knew that YouTube was part of the God Squad? Anyway, not every video, just clarifying, not every video, but some videos. So what's the bottom line? Bottom line is, let's be there for others. In the spirit of Miriam and Yocheved, let's be there for others. Let's be a shining light unto others. Let's not only live for ourselves and be, courageous heroes and feel good about ourselves, but let's actually see to it that others are uplifted in our wake, as it were. Make sense? All right, awesome, good. So many, when you study Torah, you realize every year when you study the Parsha, there's another layer, another insight to uncover. Torah is so vast and endless. I do want to mention tomorrow night, this is going to be the event of the year. This is one of the world's top scientists, Dr. Eric Green. I knew his name. I just want to see his face to channel the energy. Dr. Eric Green. He is one of the leading scientists who sequenced the human genome. It's going to be here tomorrow night, 7 p.m. Cocktail hour, food and beverage, open bar, EB catering for the food. 8 p.m. we have the talk from Dr. Green. Oh, I should have brought the national, the NIH, right? National Institute of Health, the Human Genome Institute sent me packets. Everyone's going to get a packet, like a folder. There's even a pin, a National Human Genomic, whatever it's called, National Human Genome Research Institute, the NHGRI has a pin. So cool. Anyway, come tomorrow, get your pin, and listen to an incredible lecture. All right, that's happening tomorrow. All right, good.
I have a question.
Yes, Mom.
Well, actually, okay. The question, the immediate question that popped in my brain was, what they do to save the girls?
Oh, from assimilation?
Yeah.
They got water on the table. So.
I don't know.
I
mean, I think that was more of a. I don't know practically.
They're hard, Joe.
Well, maybe because they saved the boys, they saved the girls. The girls didn't have to marry Egyptians.
Yeah, maybe that's the end. Yeah, that would help to preserve Jewish continuity. Yeah.
They had who to marry.
Good. Yeah. All right.
Thanks, Rabbi.
Pleasure. Good to see you guys. Stay safe. Stay for the poppers. I'm going to bring them out. All right. Good to see you guys. Erev Tov, everybody. Lila Tov. Have a good night. David, Dr. David. Good wishes to your dad. Let him know. Spread the word. He learned in his memory, in his honor, not memory, in his honor, in his merit. That's what I was looking for, in his merit. And we are sending incredible blessings and spiritual energy and hugs and lots of love to your dad. All right.
Thank you so much. Thank you.
Pleasure. See you guys. Take care.
Ari, I also wanted to just add one word to your
Yes.
thing. The word is commensurate, which means literally, it's one word that means measure for measure.
Nice.
They got
easier in English than in Hebrew. We got 3 words.
well, unless you want to do Shakespeare, measure for measure.
I think we're gonna save Shakespeare for next week.
Okay.
All right. We'll see you. Good night, everybody. Lila Tov.